I was jolted from a dream by shouting, my heart racing and sweat coating my skin. It was my mom's voice. I could recognize her even from just a cough or a cry. I sat up in bed, confused and frightened. The shouting had stopped, but I could still hear voices downstairs. I slipped out from under the covers and crept to my door, my bare feet cold against the old wooden floor. It's been 10 years, but I still remember the tiniest details, the way the floorboards creaked, the dust that made me sneeze, the shadows of the night creeping quietly around me. Everything felt like a scar etched into my memory. As I closed my eyes, I could still hear my parents arguing in our old home. They would have woken the neighbors by now, but here, in this desolate place, there was no one for miles. I carefully turned the doorknob, trying not to make a sound, and stepped into the hallway. Pale moonlight poured around my feet, chasing shadows into the corners. I thought I had only been asleep for a couple of hours, but I wasn't sure. I made my way up the stairs, inch by inch, straining to catch snippets of conversation from below. It was incoherent, filled with distress. Then, the door next to mine swung open, startling me. My younger sister, Maria, stood there, just 6 years old, her wide eyes reflecting her worry, her dark hair messy and wild. It struck me as odd that our brother Ryan hadn't joined her. Usually, if our parents woke us with their fighting, he would be the first to try to settle us down and reassure us. "Shoo," I whispered, but she flinched, retreating slightly yet still holding the door open. I tiptoed to the top of the steps and listened. My dad's voice was raised, demanding something, while my mom's was shaky and frantic. "Call the police. Call an ambulance, please, David." Her voice pierced through my confusion. I heard footsteps approaching the stairs, and panic surged through me. I dashed back to my room, glancing back at Maria as I passed, mouthing for her to go. As I returned to my bed, I could hear my mom's cries growing louder. They went into Ryan's room, which was across from Maria's, not their own. Why was Ryan still in there? My dad's voice was heavy and urgent, asking my mom if she had followed the instructions he'd given her. "Did any of you?" he pressed, his tone low and threatening. "No, David, please," she pleaded, and I could hear the desperation in her voice. "It might be too late." "What do you mean?" He cut her off, his voice growing colder. "Did anyone come into the house? Did any of you leave? Please, David." I felt sick as I listened to their argument. The door opened, and I peered out from under my covers, trying to feign sleep. My dad stood there, holding a shotgun aimed at my chest. "Evie," he said, his voice steady, "we need to talk." We had only been in this house for a week. If everything had gone according to plan, we would have been out in less than a month. At the beginning of the year, my dad's older brother passed away. He was the last living relative on that side of the family. The law firm handling the will had called our parents, and a meeting was set up to discuss the details. Dad hadn't spoken to his brother in years, nor had any of us met that side of the family. It was a topic he avoided completely. The news of our uncle's death seemed to stress him more than anger him. When my parents returned from the meeting, the extent of the inheritance was revealed, an enormous, old house that had once housed a large family and staff, complete with 3 stories, a basement, and miles of private land. The contents were the accumulated belongings of generations of wealthy landowners, potentially worth a fortune. Mom was both shocked and excited, while Dad appeared grim and reluctant. He didn't want to accept this inheritance. Mom couldn't understand why he wouldn't embrace it. "So what if we have to move there? What's the problem?" He refused to explain, and that only fueled the arguments that followed. They fought quietly, but the tension filled our nights. Mom would ask why he wouldn't explain his refusal, and he'd simply repeat the same objections. "It's over," I heard him say one night. "You never talked about them, they're gone. I'm your family now." I lay awake, piecing together fragments of their arguments. Ryan later told Maria and me that Mom had consulted her own lawyer about the will. She thought we could stay there for a short while, maybe a month, just to give it a try. "There's no school for 40 miles, no police, no ambulance. It's isolated. It's affecting our mental health," she'd said. "No living family members to challenge us. My lawyer thinks we could fight it and win." She painted a picture of riches that felt distant and unreal. David, we won't be cramped in this tiny apartment anymore. Dad stayed silent, and Mom grew frustrated. If you keep refusing this, you're throwing away our future. If you can't be that foolish and childish, then you don't deserve to be our father. After that, Dad left for hours, and they didn't speak the next day. A week later, they gathered us and told us we were all moving to the old house we inherited. They insisted it would only be for a month or so. As I stood there, tears brimming in my eyes, I asked my dad, "What's happening?" "Why? Just tell me what happened today. Did someone come to the house? Did any of you leave? Be honest with me." He never moved closer than the doorway, keeping the shotgun trained on me the entire time. I was too overwhelmed to think clearly, unable to process it all. My mom told him we hadn't left, but why had she lied? Was Dad going to hurt her if he found out? He looked at the wall between our rooms, sensing something. "I need you to tell me the truth, Eve. What did you do today?" I was just a kid, confused and scared. In every other moment of fear, I would have run to him, but now he was the one I feared, and I felt lost. I began to step toward him, but he pointed the shotgun at me again, commanding, "No. Stay where you are." His eyes and voice held a fierce argument. "Evie, don't make me," he said, his tone deep and furious. I had never seen him this intense, never heard him raise his voice at me. That simply wasn't the kind of man he was. He took a breath, quieting himself. "Tell me right now, did any of you leave the house today?" "Yes." I saw the truth hit him, like a blow that drained his strength. He staggered back, leaning against the doorframe, his face turning ghostly pale as he inhaled sharply through clenched teeth. "We went to the town," I continued, unable to stop once I had begun. "All of us. We got separated at the shop, and Mother got upset. Maria ran off to see some horses in one of the fields. I chased her, but she wouldn't come back. Mother and Ryan had to help. I recalled that afternoon, chasing my sister down stone paths under a darkening sky. It was supposed to be just a walk. Mother had told us to leave the house for an hour, laughing and saying, "Just don't tell your father." We hadn't thought anything of it. "How long were you all separated?" His words were cold, flat, devoid of feeling. "I don't know. 5 minutes? Maybe 10? He looked down, no longer meeting my gaze. He wiped sweat from his brow with a trembling hand and leaned against the wall. "Daddy, where's Ryan?" I asked. He looked up, and I had never seen such pain in his expression. He didn't respond. He just closed the door and locked it. I could hear his footsteps, then my mother's quiet sobs, which he ignored. After a moment, he spoke outside my room. "Evie, stay here for a bit. Don't open the door. I'll be back soon, all right? I love you." I heard him go to my sister's room, talking to her softly through the door. Then he went upstairs as my mother continued to shout his name. I hadn't moved, just sat there, feeling hollow and lost. My mother's voice came from the next room, faint through the wall. "Are you all right, darling?" she asked. "I'm fine, Mother." Did I do something wrong?" "No, sweetheart, of course not. We'll get through this, okay? He won't hurt you. I won't let him. He's not himself right now. We'll get him the help he needs, I promise." Footsteps came back up the stairs, and I heard my mother moving away. Then my father's voice, colder than before. "Lisa, I told you not to leave. Why did you lie to me?" I could hear her voice, calm yet furious. I was scared. I didn't know what you'd do if I told you. I didn't know what to say. "Just stop. Tell me what happened." "We went out, like Evie told you. We took a walk, David. I'm an adult woman, and I took my kids on a walk. Are we prisoners here?" "I asked you not to leave." His voice was strained. "One time, I just wanted you to trust me and follow the rules." "Why? Why would you ask us to follow these absurd rules without explaining anything? We thought you were going crazy. I thought you were losing it." "Shut up." His reply was so loud I flinched. "You have no idea what you've done." "Then tell me," she pleaded, her voice softer. "Please, David. What's happening? Stop changing the subject. What happened today in the town?" "Nothing, David." We went to the shop, but it was closed. Maria ran off, as she does, and Evie followed her. We split up to find her. That's all. I heard a metallic sound on the floor. Put them on, he said, his tone hard. There's a metal bar under the window. Put the cuffs around it. Are you serious? She asked, her voice low with disbelief. Do it, Lisa. I heard her move, then the sound of chains snapping shut. She started to say something else, but he was already walking away, locking the door behind him. He went to Maria's room, and a few moments passed. I thought I heard her crying, but the voices were too quiet to make out. I was too scared to get any closer. Then his voice came through the door. Evie, can you hear me? Yes, I whispered, my voice trembling. Stand away from the door, back near the window. I'm coming in, but I need you to be there. Do you understand? I understand. I moved to the window, crouching down, my back against the wall. I saw the keyhole darken as he looked through. Then he opened the door, gun raised, pointed at me. He tossed a pair of handcuffs to the floor, and they skidded to my feet. The metal bar behind you, Evie. Put the cuffs around it, then put them on. I nodded, picking them up and following his instructions. Trust me, Evie. I've always protected you, haven't I? Always. Just trust me now, he said softly. I locked the cuffs, and he left, closing the door. I saw the full moon through the window, clouds passing over it. My breath fogged up the glass, and the cold metal of the cuffs bit into my skin. I waited. The house was strange in so many ways, and not just because of its isolation or my father's fear. Little things I hadn't noticed now stood out. Every door was thick, heavy, locked with a key. Only my parents' room was different, with no keyhole, just an iron latch on the inside. The windows couldn't be opened from either side. The cellar was filled with dusty, forbidden books and moldy boxes we weren't allowed to open. When my father returned, I heard him talking to my mother. I've checked every inch of this house, he said. No one else is here. No one could get in. That's how this place was built. I survived here for 16 years. My mother's voice was quiet, barely audible. You need help, David. This is insane, what you're doing to us. To our girls. To Ryan. Whoever did this is in this house, Lisa. Don't you get that? It could be one of us.